Hi, welcome. On this video, I want to respond to a interesting social media post put out by Sean O'Shea of The Good Dog. And again, I put out a couple videos by way of Sean O'Shea as part of my Flipping the Script series. I would encourage you to watch those as well. As again, I talk through the source of the problem in the dog training world, and you'll see me focus in on what balanced dog training represents, force-free dog training represents, various concepts such as counter conditioning, going through talking about how again this idea that's very popular in the dog training world that trains a learning-based exercise sets up a problem for so many dogs and owners by way of a counterfeit picture within the framework of response. Okay, so again, I talk about the source of the problem. Again, I talk about the two core ingredients, okay, influence and control, how they need to come in, how they're reconciled through a process that follows a path of a intervention. Again, I talk about what training represents once a relationship problem is already underway between a dog and owner. So again, we start to really consider, think about, well, why are you going to, seek help in the first place? Consider, okay, just like I talk about the parenting example on most of my videos, okay, in terms of, once a child has become selfish, okay, it changes everything. Especially when you consider, again, these trainers are going to hear here on this video put out by Sean O'Shea, how that word behavior itself is used, okay? How it's being misused within the framework of this idea of things. So some of the major themes I'm going to talk about in this video, which I would encourage you to really think about, is what is training to begin with? Is it really a learning-based exercise, the way these trainers are jumping into a relationship problem and motivating dogs to respond? Or is it a intervention? Well, just apply some common sense. Okay, when you start to connect the dots that these trainers aren't connecting properly, you start to understand, no, it's actually a intervention. And so when, again, so many dogs and owners are ending up with a disconnected picture of change within a framework of response, and when we talk about response, it's the typical, getting a dog to do a sit, a down, a calm, a stay, very quickly, okay, like 5 minutes into a relationship problem. And while these trainers are assuming, because that's what they're doing, that those responses can be trusted, that they represent that the perceptions of dogs are changed in the right way. But the question you'd be asking is, well, what's the criteria to even establish that those responses represent what these trainers or what dog owners are assuming that they represent? What's that based on? Like, what's the criteria? Well, when you understand, well, it's based on nothing, okay, because understand the core ingredients, influence and control, are not part of it. They're not a part of the equation. They're not part of the process. This is why when you get a dog on a leash and you start to bring a dog under intentional control, for a dog that's holding control in the relationship already, and when again how you're interacting in terms of the dog understanding, intent, and I talk about that, you'll see challenge rise up very quickly. And but then off leash or using treats, you'll see, well, this dog looks fantastic. Well, then you start to consider, okay, why does the dog look so great in the training environment, moving around for treats, but then get a dog on a leash a certain way, and it's a nightmare. Well, then that starts to make sense when you add to this, you layer this up, the fact that after you invest all your time and money into this idea using treats, and then you get home with your dog and say, I'm still dealing with a relationship problem, it hasn't improved. Well, it starts to make sense. So, but understand all these trainers, they're not marketing this idea to make sense. They don't want dog owners to ask questions to say, well, is this really all it's about? Just to sit down, come and stay like this way? But again, think about just by concept, think about the selfish child example. Absolutely, you can get a selfish child to, do some good, responses like picking up their toys for a brand new Xbox game. But again, connect the dots. Is that really what it's about? Can you trust that way? If you're jumping into a relationship problem when the child has become selfish, you don't, consider the parent's role, the parenting style and play. See, this is the problem. Understand that dogs are social animals. It follows the same, it connects the same way. And so if you add on to what I'm saying and understand this is the thing that trainers don't want you to consider. They want you to ignore all the problems in the dog training world. They don't want you to consider just how common it is for dog owners to experience this bad result, right? They just want to blame the dog because that's like a part of the package deal here. Well, when you start to not, when you look at it and say, well, hold on here a second, I follow this trainer saying there's something wrong with the dog, and I euthanize my dog. And you start to step back and say, well, hold on here a second. No, it was actually this idea. It's what's being marketed. Well, now we got a real problem, right? But understand that this is where we're at in the dog training world. All the inherent problems, all the collateral damage. You start to understand just how bad this really, really is. I don't think people have any idea when you consider that, okay, force free, but balanced dog trainers are doing the exact same thing here. Now you start to get it. And then, but again, the solution, I talk about what training is and what it isn't. The solution by way of a intentional interaction-based method, being able to connect dots, reconcile, okay, the reactions of dogs properly to the relationship. All those themes I talk about, they all start to come together and things make sense. So if you're a dog owner, I really encourage you to pay attention to the information I put out. Understand that the current state of the dog training world, all these trainers, they do not want to hear this, okay? This is not a message that they are going to accept based on what they've already sold out to. Understand that once you've crossed those lines, forget it, because now they're exploiting this idea. You make a lot of money off of it because it plays into people's emotions. It plays into the superficial idea. It's all appearance based. And so they have the kind of home field advantage with dog owners that need to change the right way. So this plays into all of this. They're all marketing this. They're all guilty of doing this. And it's a massive problem. So here I wanted to respond to this, again, this social media post put out by Sean O'Shea. It's interesting because it really calls into question, okay, how far are these trainers willing to go? Sometimes they kind of tippy-toe a little bit close to the edge here with admitting there's a problem, and you'll see that here by way of Sean O'Shea. But again, understand I'm very specific as to, okay, there is truth, there is a standard, okay, there's a way forward, and I'm very specific as to the role of influence as well, which I'll talk about in terms of intercepting, okay, as a dog's expressing, this is where I get into this whole thing about an expressed state of mind as controls being expressed. Okay, understand this is not something you hear these trainers talk about because they're not dialed into the relationship that way. Okay, they're not. Okay, and that comes, you watch my series, you'll see that that's one of the big themes. They're not dialed into what I call the dog's level of stinking thinking. Okay, when you're in the middle of a relationship problem, they're not dialed in. So therefore, that door is completely wide open, okay, to the problem in terms of a counterfeit picture change. Completely wide open. So understand, I'm very specific. Okay, here's what the process is. Here's how to come out on the other side by way of a predictable, intentional outcome beyond appearances, okay, beyond superficial response. Okay, so I'm going to read this. I'm going to play some of the video here, but I want to talk through this because, specifics matter. I understand. I talk about why the method matters, okay, because it needs to have the integrity of what the method is. It needs to align. It needs to speak the right language to close that door, okay, to make sure coming on the other side, okay, you're going to have a better relationship. Okay, you're not going to be deceived into, which is what's going on here in the dog training world, thinking that you do, and you really don't. Okay, to understand, this is the big lie in the dog training world. So here it goes on, the incompatible behavior lie. So right here, that word pops up, behavior. Okay, I talk about what does the word even mean to these trainers. Well, you understand they're all about just superficial response. Okay, so when they talk about a behavior, they're talking about a response. Okay, they're not talking about an expressed state. Okay, they're typically talking about dogs respond. Okay, so right away they're not dialed in that way. So you have a disconnect here with how that word is used, and it's used within both these groups. Okay, balanced and force-free misapply this word because the foundation of what is the basis of a process is wrong. Okay, so anything that comes off of that process, because the process itself is based on appearances, based on superficial response, anything that comes off of that, is going to be flawed. Okay, it's not going to line up. Just understand, whether you're talking about devices like remote collars, whatever these trainers are talking about, understand it's not going to line up. Period. So your foundation has to be right. Okay, those two core ingredients, influence and control, they have to be reconciled. If they're not reconciled, now you got a problem. Okay, understand that that's what it always comes back to that. Okay, if you watch my videos, I keep bringing it back to that because that matters. So here it says, this was once the land of the purely positive force-free brigade, but it's been creeping more and more into the so-called balanced dog training world. So here we go with Sean O'Shea trying to, it's like playing both sides of the fence here, right? Trying to kind of call out, right? Saying, well, there's a problem here in the balanced dog training community. But the question people ask, well, how big of a problem is, what is the real problem? See, this is where you get into the nuts and bolts of this. This is where the rubber meets the road, because what I talk when I talk about what training isn't, when I say training is not a learning-based exercise, there it is. Okay, this is what upsets the balanced dog training community and the force-free community for a reason, because they're both aligned with this idea. So understand that there's the line in the sand. So when you want to talk about, okay, what's the problem here? It's about this idea that training's a learning-based exercise when a relationship problem is underway. It's not. Okay, but these trainers approach it that way because what are they doing? They're motivating dogs to respond. When I talk about what's the motivator, the relationship is the motivator. Do not motivate responses the way these trainers do. You do not do that. Okay, you have to attach, okay, through again, intentional interaction-based method. You have to attach that to the process. It has to come into alignment. That has to be your focal point. Okay, it's gonna take a power play level to a certain point, but to understand, again, reconciling the reaction to relationship, there's a lot of things happening with the method to make it leveled out. Okay, so it's not meant to generate a high level of challenge where you're going to get bitten. Okay, this is about really there's certain kind of things happening through the method that are going to keep things leveled out. But those core ingredients have to be reconciled. Understand that, and it can't happen through this idea of things. The only way those two core ingredients can be reconciled is through a interaction-based approach. That's it. Understand that that's what really defines, okay, what's the problem here? So as balanced dog trainers feel both internal and external pressure to bend reality, integrity for the sake of status amongst their peers, internal and revenue amongst. But this is the hypocrisy of it all. Okay, if you identify as a balanced dog trainer, if you're attached to this idea, then you are exploiting. Okay, understand that there's no, I just call it the way it is. See, this is the problem here. You call it the way it is. So a lot of these trainers are trying to play. That's what they're doing. That's what balanced dog training is. It's playing both sides of the fence. This is where you hear a lot of these trainers say, "Oh, clicker training. Oh, we do that too." And here's the difference with me. Years ago, I wouldn't even sit down at the table with clicker trainers. Okay, I mean, there's the thing. It wasn't about being mean and nasty about it either. Just saying, no, I understand the problems here, so I'm not going to come into agreement with that which I know is sets up a problem. You wouldn't do that. Ethically and morally, you would not do that. If you really truly care about dogs and owners, you wouldn't do that. And so this is the problem. So any trainers out there that want to talk about ethics, then it flies in the face of what they're aligned with. Understand that. You can't reconcile the statements that the trainers are making. They can plead ignorance or whatever, but look at outcomes, okay? If you're a balanced dog trainer, a force-free trainer, and you're aligned with this idea of things, there's blame shifting involved. Period. Okay, period. I don't care what these trainers, but if you pay attention to some statements they're making on social media, they're doing it. Okay, so just understand that's part of the course. It's a package deal, and that's a fact. Okay, period. Now, I get in this whole thing about, don't get wrong, this is challenging because you're still going to could end up with a very challenging situation with the dog and owner, but at least you're not blaming dogs for the wrong reasons, okay? You're not blaming dogs that way. You're saying this is a challenging situation, so therefore, if you have to say, rehome a dog, the right method is going along with that. Okay, understand that this is a problem here. So, but these trainers, they're on a whole different, they're dialed in a whole different way. The blame shifting's happening, euthanizing dogs. This is this is part of the current state of the dog training world. So here's going on about to appears the most sophisticated, virtuous, and caring. Don't get me wrong, there's lots of virtue signaling going on in the dog training world right now. Brutal purity spiral taking place in the balanced world currently. And again, what I say is, for anyone to speak truth about what's happening, you cannot identify as a balanced dog trainer or be aligned with this idea of things. That's just the way it is. And externally, to appeal to owners' desire for problem behaviors to be solved with sunshine rainbows, both involved heavy-duty integrity and courage compromise as well. Real courage, okay, separating, right, from this idea thing, separating from this tribal mentality, separating yourself from identifying as a balanced dog trainer, period. There's courage, because then, guess what? You're going to be standing pretty much alone. But that's the way it is. But this is just a backdrop for the why. Now on to the actual topic and what we do. We truly want dogs and owners to succeed. The stuff is really simple. Directly address, correct the problem behavior. See, and this is the problem. It's about the relationship. Okay, these trainers are talking about behaviors. It's not that they're not dialed in that way. The way I talk about. I wanted to then use an obedience command if desired. What's that mean? Command, obedience command. See, there's the thing about being specific here in terms of the role of influence, okay? Intercepting an expressed state. Obedience command. What's a command? Commands themselves, don't even, if you watch my videos, I'm not even using verbal commands out of, let's say, a 14-day board and train process until like day 12. Okay, it's a language of the method, it's intent. Okay, so as perceptive dogs change, really think about this. As perceptive dogs change, dogs changes how they perceive you the right way through those core ingredients coming into a process of speaking the right language. Then you verbalize. Okay, now these trainers do it that way because, see, their whole thing, see, and this is the problem, is like, it's about relationship. If you use a command at the very beginning, once you're already not perceived the right way, ask yourself the question, well, the dog might do a sit, but then what's the expectation that's been set up? I do A and I get, or B, I get rewarded, or I get something. And here's the depth of the problem, because then it's about just motivating a response. But again, think about the selfish child example. Think about parental influence. How is that established? How are parents interacting with, right? So this whole thing about using commands, right? You have to think deeper. Think, okay, yeah, dog can do a sit, but what you've already signed? What contract have you already signed? Just think about a selfish child going to a parent because they get their ice cream, get what they want. And so in the dog training world, how they see that is, the child, listens better for the parent. Just that's their default. There's no, what are the motives that underpin those responses, right? There's nothing about the relationship that way. It's just superficial, just saying, oh, that's happening. There's a response happening. We just automatically assume that that's good. See, and that's where we're at in the dog training world. Understand, this is the confusion. There's no depth. There's no what underpins those responses by way of relationship, the motives that align with those responses, nothing. Because the core ingredients aren't part of this process to begin with. This is where all the confusion's coming from. So it's going about, let's go back here. The correction also enables you not so, again, balanced dog trainers, they will correct the dog, but I talk about this whole thing about not being dialed in. So if they're in a reactionary posture, so it's not about being dialed in where, just as controls being expressed, based again on a current state of the relationship problem, they're not dialed in that way in terms of the proactive role of influence. So therefore, that's a problem. Just understand that's a problem from the get-go. It also enables you to have use obedience command, unless it's desired for practicality, and it simply allows your dog to be at liberty because He will self-regulate, self-monitor, and behavioral choice. And O'Shea's kind of like he's, a lot of his language is right. He comes off sounding very philosophical, but again, you got to get into the nuts and bolts of this, right? You sound great, right? But you have to actually get into, okay, what's the foundation here? See, that's the problem with any trainer. You have to get into, okay, what represents their approach, okay? Because there's no way around this. Understand that, balanced dog training is a problem, major problem. Um, so of course you need to choose your path, but it's good to know what goes with the path you choose. Requires tons of micromanagement and far less freedom. So now this is keying up on a couple points here. Because here's the thing. It's not like O'Shea doesn't touch on some things that I'm in total agreement with. Okay, and this is what you'll find with some of these balanced dog trainers. They can be closer to the reality as to what the problem really is. Okay, and very, very close to that, or on that journey towards that. I talked about that before. They could be on that journey of kind of personal insight to get there, but not be there. Okay, because understand something here. When you get into this whole thing of actually going over to that point of saying what training is, it's an intervention, you're going to lose 90% of your subscribers based on the fact that you identify as a balanced dog trainer and you're playing off of that ideology the way I described. So it puts these trainers, that's that trade-off point. That's that, okay, I put myself in a corner now. Now I got no friends. Okay. Now I'm not in community with, those identify as, forest free or balance. What do I do now? And now I'm like, I'm probably going to make a lot less money, right? Because the whole culture is such. Understand that this is the problem here. So, that's why you see a lot of these trainers kind of tippy-toe right up to that line, and they won't go further than that, right? Because it's almost like they can't, or they won't, or they might. But there's a massive trade-off when you do that. But ethically, this is why I said this before. I made that, I settled this years ago because it is an ethical issue. So for me, saying way back in 2006, even before that, I talk about my journey. I encourage you to watch the recent podcast I put out on Rumble. I talk about my journey, about that. I'm very transparent about opening up about my whole journey. I'd encourage you to watch that. It talks about, none of the emotionally uncomfortable correction stuff, right? So you get into this thing about because of the culture, right? Because there's misinformation, superficial. So you get into the specifics, and this can be very challenging even when people look at my videos, because it's like saying, okay, this is like different. Okay, what's going on here? But understand if you're kind of contrasting what I do off of the culture of what has been marketed, this sets up a problem, right? The other thing, choosing the non-corrective path guarantees you plenty of negative ripple effects in your relationship. As your dog sees you as a positive only treat dispensing doormat. Okay, that's true, right? Positive, but the thing is, it's about perceptions not changing, right? Of the dog. This whole thing about positive isn't so positive when you understand a dog's getting a hold control. So the negative blowback is the fact that you're never going to get your dog fixed, and potentially the dog is going to bite somebody. You're never truly going to be happy. You can't take your dog out in public. So, all these bad things. This is all the collateral damage. So the positive is this self-focused stuff going on with, dog owners and trainers where it's all about me, my feelings, my emotions. See, that's the problem. So you can't have it both ways. You can't be emotion and, leader. It takes a different path. Understand? So it's like parenting. It's like, hey, I love my kids, but, I have to be the parent. It's like, it's not the friendship thing that way. Of course, as you get older and your kids get older, the relationship changes. It takes on a different role. But dogs as social animals, that's why I keep using the parenting example, the child example, because developmentally, in terms of the parental role and the role of the dog owner, it aligns perfectly. Okay, I mean, just understand that. That's why all these trainers will use to add all the examples and stuff. It doesn't apply. Okay, and while they're doing that, they're doing that on purpose because they can't go there, right? Because these are the same blaming dogs trainers that will blame dogs all the time. So let's watch some of this video here for a couple minutes. It talks a little bit more about some of this, but again, I want to get into specific because again, this is interesting in the sense, okay, you know, where the question is, how far are these trainers willing to go, and are they really being authentic to actually call out what the real problem is?
Okay, gang, let's talk about incompatible behaviors. If you've been in the dog training game, if you're a trainer or you're an owner and you've done any research.
So again, stop very quick. So you talk about incompatible behaviors. I don't think that way, but you know, that's not how you should be thinking. You know, it's like think about expressed control manifesting, okay, in various ways. You know, understand the word behavior right away. When these trainers use the word behavior, it's tied into this superficial within the framework of responses, right, in a very superficial way. Okay, like the sit, the down, the come, the stay, reward. No, don't think that way. Okay, those think about how those two core ingredients, influence and control, how they have to be reconciled. Okay, so it's interaction based. Okay, so this whole behavior, it's really deceptive. Okay, these trainers, I'm not saying they're doing it intentionally, because they bought into this. They bought into what I call the big lie. They bought into it. So, you know, but you have to apply critical thinking here. Understand that the thing that's really lost in the dog training world with majority of trainers out there is that it's just taken, they just accepted this idea of things that has already been kind of ready made. Just it's like, you know, instant potatoes, just add the water, right? Just put up a website. Like, and this is the problem. And so once you do that, and they're not incentivized, and these trainers aren't incentivized to do the right thing, because then you can just generate so much popularity and money based on the culture. So if you don't understand as an individual, if you don't look at this right away, you're in trouble. That's all. I mean, really, that's the truth of it.
You've probably heard this concept. And the whole concept is basically, instead of addressing the actual behavioral issue that you're struggling with, you teach your dog an incompatible behavior. And what that's supposed to do is cause your dog.
So here, and this goes into the one I'm talking about, the role of influence, right? Intercepting a dog's state of mind as control is manifest and being expressed versus redirecting focus. Okay, and this goes into the problem with certain concepts such as counter conditioning through association, right? You know, dog perceiving the person differently, but not the right way. Okay, understand that, you know, it's like, so we talk about shifting focus. So I even talk about this by way of trainers out there like Larry Crone, talking about rewarding, you know, bad behavior to create good behavior. That's a great example of what I'm talking about. You know, changing focus, right? Then assuming that the perception is changing. These themes, I talk about these themes of bribery, right? Accommodation and negotiation, right? These themes are in play here with these trainers.
Not to engage in that behavior that you actually don't like by teaching them something else to do. It all sounds nice and flowery and yummy and all that stuff, but the reality is, if you haven't corrected the actual behavior, that behavior is still cruising along.
So he's right here, understand. So, but the language, though, like he's talking about behavior, an expressed state. See, that's the problem here. You have to be dialed into the dog's state of mind, into the relationship. And how do you do that? The foundation has to be right. Okay, so here you have O'Shea talking about, you know, correcting, right? Yes and no. Okay, yes. But then the whole balanced dog trainer approach, okay, that doesn't line up. Okay, we keep talking about this.
It's still in your dog's repertoire. It's still there and ready to rock and roll whenever the moment strikes. But if you just keep using incompatible behaviors, you'll be under the impression that you actually have a dog who's not doing that stuff until the moment strikes, and then the dog wants to do it. Let's run through some of that stuff. It used to be in the positive only force free world where trainers really push that. If a dog jumped, they would teach you to just ignore the dog, turn your back, or most likely teach the dog to sit, right? So the incompatible behavior was sit. If the dog's nipping at you, then give them a toy, and some people call that redirecting the dog to something else, but it's really just you're giving the dog an alternative behavior.
That word, so no, you're bribing, okay? You're shifting the focus. Like example, I use one of my videos, like a child's mouthing off of the parent, and I don't know where the parent hauls a chocolate bar out, and just think about this. Hauls a chocolate bar out in mid, is it as the kid is just mouthing off, and you're just hold it out like out of nowhere and just hold it out to the side a little bit, and what happens? The child, oh, suddenly start looking at the chocolate bar. Redirecting focus, right? You haven't fixed anything. But see, this is how it's being packaged up. So, but here, with O'Shea, he has that word attached here because again, he's trying to explain this. And so in his kind of journey here, there's problems. But if you watch the videos I put out that he has up on his site, in terms of what he's showcasing is change for a dog off leash, jumping around. There's a because the core ingredients the core ingredients attached to a leash, they're what are going to reveal through the dog understanding intent. Those are what reveal change, okay, and create change, but reveal the current state of the relationship. So there's problems, okay, but that's why I say with the balanced dog trainers, they have a sense of things. You can have a sense that don't use treats like a Piz candy machine. Like and see, that's the problem here. Is like having a sense of something doesn't mean that you understand what the real problem is. Because you're still attached to this idea of things.
Or an incompatible behavior. Chew this rather than chew me. Unfortunately, this has moved into the balance training world. And so now what we have is a bunch of balance trainers doing virtually the same thing. Their go-to is typically place command. And so they'll use place.
So same thing. So he's working the same. He's right saying, okay, place command. Some influence and control is in there, right? Because it's like, hey, place, right? But the question is, well, what does that do? Is that specific? No. It's like getting the dog to wait for their food. Okay, the dog's mind can still be jumping right over you. That's why you can get a hold of a dog and start to be. You'll see, because now it's personal, right? It's aligning properly. It's more. It has to be intentional, right? So you can say place, and there'll be some influence control happening within the balanced dog training approach. But the question always is it enough? See, that's the problem. But then at the same time, they're tied into this within the superficial framework of response. So you get this layers up. Is this why I say that, yeah, change can and will happen even beyond the idea of things based on the person. Because I talk about the totality of the relationship. Like every day you're interacting with your dog at all various points in the relationship. But those things factor in. But see, here's the problem. When you tie into this idea of things in this superficial framework of response is the basis of, of change or your basis of assessment, then you got a real problem because people be failing. You won't even see it because those two core ingredients are not brought in to reveal what's really happening. So understand those two core ingredients, influence and control, they have to come in. They have to be reconciled. If that's not the foundation, you're in trouble. Okay. I mean, so it's the reality.
Place command for dogs that rush the front door, dogs that jump on people.
So the same thing. So that's why you'll see me nudging and tapping, drawing as the dog is expressing, okay, in a very proactive way. Therefore, the dog's more agreeable because it makes sense. The just as part versus waiting. The dog's already at a level of controls being expressed. That's why I keep using the example of balanced dog trainers represent the parent who waits for the selfish child to already get into the toy aisle and start to, act out and pull the toy. And then, oh, now I'm going to jump in. So that's really what balanced dog training represents, is this thing. They're in a reactionary state. They're not dialed in the way I described. Versus what this system of training represents is, hey, I'm dialed into, I'm gathering information. I already know that I'm dealing with a relationship problem. My child has become bad attitude, selfish. And the moment my feet hit the floor in the morning, right, I'm, dialed into the reality of where I'm at, the current state of relationship. Now I'm proactive, I'm engaged. So there is going to be a micromanaging appearance, but only based on, it's going to look more that way based again on just how selfish the child is. It's the same thing. You're going to have to maybe ground the child. It's going to take on more of almost a tyrannical look in a way, but it's temporary. I understand this is the whole thing about a process, and there is some accommodation even in that. It's about striking the right balance, but understand that it's about what the process needs to be. You have to identify the process has to take a level of intervention. If it doesn't, then you're in trouble. This is the problem. This is why, in terms of we talk about structure and with dogs that have already gained level of control. Everything becomes a supply source. They're out, they're connecting with other dogs, people. They've already gained control. So, and that's how dogs can look balanced. Dogs can look well behaved even as they have already gained an incredible amount of control in the relationship. Because if you're like a narcissistic person, think about supply, right? It's no different. This is why, again, you take everything I say, put it to the test. You put a dog on a leash, then you're going to see it. Or if the dog is invested already in a certain situation, and then you try to remove the dog from that situation in a reasonable way, that dog's going to flare up, right? So, you can see it, but you have to understand that this is the problem with appearances. You have to identify what is training to begin with.
Dogs that counter-surf, dogs that are chaotic in the house. You name the behavior in the house that owners don't like, and most balance trainers are going to use place as the incompatible behavior for all of that stuff rather than actually addressing that stuff. Now, I'm a big proponent of place, and there's a ton of value there, but I'm also a big proponent of addressing the actual behavior and then using.
So, like I said, replace that with express state, okay? And then correcting, okay, yeah, you want to intercept it. And I talk about this, yeah, absolutely. Has to be intercepted.
Place as whatever you need it for. If I want to have my dog more included while I'm making breakfast or dinner or watching a movie or anything like that, and keep my dog out from under feet, it's perfect for that. Place has a ton of value. And
so here, all to say, okay, I'll stop it here. All to say, when you get into the nuts and bolts of this, you have to, and again, this is where it's helpful to go in and, if you want to see, the trainer of us, the journey of, say, even a certain trainer, because I got to look at this and say, Sean O'Shea's on point here for certain things. But then when you see how language is used, such as that word behavior, you tie it into what balanced dog training is, well, it's a problem. Okay, understand that. Because again, you have to be specific. Understand it is about coming out on the other side with a predictable, intentional outcome. So the method matters. And see, that's the thing when people look at me saying, they'll say, well, balanced dog trainers are better than force free. I could say yes and no, right? Because here's the point. If you're dealing with a situation with a dog that has hit the aggressive level, okay, now the method really matters. Because that door has to be closed. To reverse course, the nuts and bolts of it matter, right? And so that door is not being closed to balanced dog training. So this is where you go watch my videos, so you see these trainers getting blindsided. Some of these trainers through, watch the Tom Davis video is a good example of that. I have lots of great examples there. And so understand, it's not about getting in these personalities either of these individuals. I could look at someone like Sean O'Shea, say, could be a great guy. I could sit down and talk to him, maybe, go through all this and, but that's not the point. This is about getting into the methodology of all this. So that's what I'm doing. I'm going through, because it is really I'm going against the culture here. I'm going totally, going opposite to what all these trainers are doing. But then my encouragement, anyone watch, look at this. If you really look at the state of the dog training world, just how bad it is, if you really get a sense of that, this will all start making sense. The information I put out is very inconvenient, right? And there's a reason why you don't hear any of these trainers going to the point that I make of saying what training is, because now there's a trade-off. Understand, it puts all these trainers in a trade-off situation the majority aren't going to make. Because they've already, if they're going to do it, they would have done it at the beginning for the majority of these trainers, because the trade-off for them is too much, because they've sold out to this stuff. It's like a giant Ponzi scheme. I don't care if you're talking about balanced trainers or force free. As balanced dog trainers, they're playing both sides of the fence. So this is going to hit the wall. Understand, this is so bad. This is going to keep going and going because it's coming apart now. So, don't take my word for anything. Do your own research here. But because the information I put out is so hard for people to accept, only because of what the human has done here. Okay, this goes right back to Pavlov and Skinner. People have bought into this lie, and now it's just hitting this tipping point level. So again, check out the information I put out. Lots of great information. I don't market the same way because I can't. Okay, I don't market because, people aren't going to be happy. But if you really care about your dog, Like if you really care about people, because goes right into both. If you really care about people and dogs, you'll pay attention to what I'm saying, because it's about caring about people the right way. I don't see how any trainer out there can say they really care about people and dogs the right way while marketing this ideology. It's a total contradiction. It's a total contradiction. You don't care how popular this is. It's very popular, but this is the problem. It's about the broken, flawed human here. Now this is a totally broken. The dog training world is totally upside down. It's like the worst example of these people are trying to prop this up as science. It's probably the best and worst example of how something can be so corrupted and accepted based again on the selfish human. I mean, it's awful what's happening. So I know this is tough information, but keep talking about it. Hopefully, this video is very helpful. I would really encourage you to consider what I'm saying. Go put everything to the test. I have lots of videos out there. Watch my series. But again, the dog training world is in the state that it's in for a reason. Thanks for watching.